Mr. Standing, how did you get to the idea of basic income?
Well, first of all, in the early 1980s, so it's a long time ago, I realized that all the change of economic strategy in Western Europe and North America was pushing for flexible labor markets. And flexible labor markets meant, in fact, making workers increasingly insecure in many respects. And the old social security systems that had been built up in welfare states and in Eastern Europe were clearly inappropriate for flexible labor markets. And as a result, what was happening was that more and more workers were facing economic insecurity and had no prospect of obtaining income security. And at that point, it seemed very clear to me that we should be promoting a basic income as a floor for people to have a sense of stability in which to be able to make decisions rationally. And it was that initial thought that, for me, made it absolutely certain that without a basic income, people were going to be more and more insecure as globalization advanced and as flexible labor markets advanced. And I've just written a book which is bringing all those arguments up to date.
And you are somehow connected with the International Labour Organization. In 2002, the Ninth Congress of BN was in Geneva at the office of ILO. What is their position to basic income?
Well, I was, as you say, in the ILO at that time as Director of Socioeconomic Security, and I had the privilege of organizing that particular Congress. I was also co-chairman of BIEN at that time, and I had been for some years. And we decided to organize it in Geneva and in the ILO itself. And hundreds of people came to that, including many from inside the ILO. And it was addressed by Prime Minister and many prominent people, which was an exciting time because it forced the ILO to think afresh about social security globally. And up to that time, I think the most of the officials inside the ILO were strongly in favor of old-style social security systems. And I think it helped change the perspective within the ILO so that now they are much more in favor of a social floor across the world, recognizing that without such a base, old-style social security systems would leave a lot of people in poverty and in economic insecurity. So it was quite a significant time for the BIEN Congress.
And you're traveling around the world giving lectures on basic income. Where have you been, and how is the reaction on this topic?
Well, it's a very exciting time, because when we first set up BIEN in the 1980s, a group of us, of economists, philosophers, sociologists, and a few activists, I think the mood in the mainstream political parties and intellectuals was against it. But gradually that has been changing, and in the last 5 years in particular, there's been a dramatic change of perspective around the world. When I first went to Brazil in the early 1990s, for example, people were very skeptical about the prospect of a basic income. Well, gradually that has changed so that today over 46 million Brazilians are receiving a monthly cash transfer, and there's a law on the statute books saying that the country should move to a basic income. Now, that is a dramatic change. And even the World Bank, when I went there in 1999 to lecture about basic income, there was hostility from their social protection department. Well, now they've come round in favor of conditional cash transfers, and when they asked me to speak at the launch of their report, I said, all you've got to do now is to remove the first C, conditional, because conditional cash transfers tend to be inefficient, inequitable, and costly. But we've seen a dramatic change, and I'm delighted to see that. So we now have a Bien in Italy. We have a Bien which is about to launch in Japan, and I'm about to go out to give the keynote at the inauguration of basic income network for Japan. We have a United States basic income organization, and it's having its next Congress with the basic income for Canada in Montreal in April. And there's an enormous improvement in support for moving towards a basic income.
And do you think basic income is really realistic, and what must happen for an implementation?
Well, I think it's increasingly appreciated that it's not only affordable, it is affordable without a doubt, but if we are serious about wanting to reduce the growth of inequality, which has become a serious global problem, you're going to have to think very much about moving towards a basic income, which is both unconditional and universal. Because without that, you're not going to be able to reduce inequality, because most of the existing social security schemes don't reach the poor, and they don't actually work very efficiently. So it's a question of moving towards a basic income as a necessary condition for the functioning of a market economy. And I think it's increasingly evident that the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009 was not just a financial market crisis, but it was a transformation crisis, in the sense that there's so much economic insecurity and uncertainty and growing inequality that we're not going to get through the crisis unless those problems of inequality are addressed. And I think you're seeing this taking shape, even to the extent of the debates around what's happening in Greece today. Now, Greece is going to be followed by a number of other countries where, as a result of trying to deal with the financial crisis, government spending was pushed up, but now governments are finding they have huge budgetary deficits, and they're trying to cut social spending. Well, if you cut social spending, you're going to be hurting the poor and lower income groups, the precariat, as I call them. And that's not going to be sustainable, because many people are going to be driven to political extremism if we're not careful. So I think the conditions are such that more and more we're going to have to think afresh about addressing economic insecurity and inequality. And that means that people will think more favorably towards moving towards a basic income.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Okay, I hope it's useful.